look, I think that the College Football Playoff Committee, and it may ultimately come down that this has to be a Big Ten decision, okay? But the College Football Playoff Committee, in my opinion, at this point yields more power in terms of the right now consequences for your action than the NCAA has ever had. Because in my life, watching this sport, watching college basketball, football, baseball, whatever, the consequences for your actions, the punishment for those actions often came way down the line. So much so that they were often pushed back upon because it was, well, why are you punishing these kids? These kids didn't do anything wrong. They didn't break the rules. And that was the defense for things that may, in the mind's eye of people that, wanted to keep, and boy, this feels like a very loose word we're using here with the world of college football, but like the amateurism of the sport alive, right? And now, obviously, we've landed ourselves in the midst of not just a playoff capacity, but a transfer portal that feels like free agency, NIL deals where it feels like players are professionals. And, so there's a lot that kind of goes into this conversation. But back in the day, it was just, it felt like guys who were in college playing football. And people would say, well, you can't punish those guys. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't know about X, Y, and Z. All right, so I will go with this take, though. I actually heard somebody today say that they felt like it was unfair to punish the Michigan players on the team today because they didn't know that this was happening. They didn't know that this was going on. And again, we're still waiting to find out if everything that has been said is actually true. And the Big Ten, with some kind of resolution or whatever they come out with, or the NCAA, or maybe, wait for it, again, the College Football Playoff Committee. And so that really got me thinking, right? Okay, so if we just go at it with the thought process that Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, and company did wrong, purposefully, knowingly, everybody's in on it. Players may not have a clue this is happening. I can agree to that sentiment. I can say it's possible. Players had no clue. Some of them were probably thinking, man, how do we know so much about these teams? But it's possible that the players had no clue. So it's twofold, in my opinion. First, if we think of it like a business, we think of it like a corporation. And this is a business, but a corporation where it's a thriving company or whatever is happening. Right? Like whatever type business it is, maybe it's some kind of venture capitalist firm. And all of a sudden there's scandal at the top. Right? Now, every little person working at that company probably doesn't know about what's happening above them, doesn't have any clue that the bosses are, cooking the books and this and that and the other, whatever. I'm going to be honest. I'm not some kind of corporate criminal, so I'm not good with all the lingo that you might use in that scenario. Some of you may watch tons of movies that lead you down, that kind of vernacular where you're talking like that, whatever those terms would be. But the guys at the bottom, when that company folds up, they don't have jobs. And I understand. I understand that's different from college football, but guess what? Those individuals at that corporation chose to work where they work. Those kids, they chose to go to Michigan. Nobody forced them to go to Michigan. They made the decision. And if you work for a company who ends up having scandal at the top and you lose your job because of that scandal, well, guess what? That to me is exactly like the situation with Deion Sanders and the jewelry that was stolen while Colorado was out the Rose Bowl from the players. Deion wanted the Rose Bowl and won the NCAA to pay back the kids for the items that were lost. Are you kidding me? How about teaching them a lesson about insurance? I mean, Deion's on my television telling me about insurance. He's always telling me about Aflac and all that stuff. Well, maybe he should have told his football players, hey, guys, before we roll out to Southern California for this ball game, make sure you got some insurance on your jewelry if you're going to bring it. And if you're not going to bring it, if it's real expensive, make sure you got some insurance on your jewelry. It's practical. So if you go to this scenario, any kid that's playing at Michigan today chose to go to Michigan, willingly went to Michigan. And when you make a move like that, you accept the risk that comes along with it. I don't care if you're 18 or 19. I don't care if you just transferred in through the portal. You accept the risk when you go to a business, a job, a program that the people above you, like when you met with Jim Harbaugh, you chose to go there for a reason. You believed in him, you trusted him, whatever those circumstances were. And maybe you shouldn't have. But the College Football Playoff Committee, and Tim chimes in today, listening to us in Rossville, Georgia. He says Michigan deserves some type of punishment. And he says it's still on his bucket list to get a chance to meet Dabo Swanny. Yeah, there should be some type of punishment. And here's the thing. If the NCAA won't do anything about it, then the College Football Playoff Committee, I hope, and they have said, and I know I disagree with it, they have said that that's not their capacity. Their capacity is to put the best teams on the field. But if your belief is that you are going to take away from these Michigan players that didn't know anything about it, just like it's been in the past when things have been, consequences have been handing out or punishments have been handed out several years down the line. I think it was Stephen A. Smith, who I rarely, when I tell you I rarely agree with Stephen A. Smith, it's super rare because he's just kind of over the top for me. I'm sure that I could be a little more over the. He just gets going, and I'm like, Stephen A., just pump the brakes a little, man. Be a little more Colin Cowherd and a little less Gilbert Gottfried with your takes. And so if we just think about it from that standpoint, the players, if Michigan's in the college football playoff and they were cheating, if this is all found to be true, those students at Michigan who are trusted in a coach who may have done one of the more nefarious sign-stealing deals that I've ever heard of in the sport. I equated it here on the program yesterday. Like, what would the consequence be if you found out today that Tom Brady had been their quarterback all year? Would the College Football Playoff Committee just go, oh, well? Or would they do something about it? So if you know that they did something, and if you find out that it is, in fact, what is said to have happened, which was that Michigan had an undercover op, really, a former military guy who was either going in advanced scouting team signals and filming with cameras or cell phones, or buying tickets and having other people there to do the same and gathering that information and creating charts to help Michigan know what plays were coming defensively, then to me, if all of that comes out to be accurate, it's no different than playing a player that's ineligible. And if you play a player that's ineligible, you wouldn't be able to be in the college football playoff. To me, those things are not exactly the same, but they are similar enough that the consequence should result in the same thing. But the kids didn't know. The kids didn't know. What about the kids from, say, Alabama, if they're left out because Michigan is in? Those kids weren't even at a school that was doing the thing. But now they're the ones that have a consequence, because the true punishment for this is being left out of the college football playoff. And if you don't have the intestinal fortitude, if this is all found to be true, to leave Michigan out, if you don't have the intestinal fortitude to do that, then you are by default leaving out other kids, other student athletes across the country who were not involved in that, who didn't even choose to go to the school where the coach, again, may have, I'm going to say may, I don't know that he did know, where the coach may have known that this was going on and took advantage of it to win football games. So I think the last student athletes that the College Football Playoff Committee, that the NCAA, that you should be worrying about are the student athletes that chose to go under the guidance and leadership of Jim Harbaugh. Those should be the last student athletes that you should be thinking about in these moments, if this is indeed a Michigan issue that was known by their coaching staff. If it's all found to be true, of all the student athletes in college football, the ones you should be worried about how they are affected by it are the kids at Michigan, in my opinion, because they chose to work at the place they work. They made the decision, just like people do when they go and they jump on at some big corporate job where they think they're going to make a ton of money, and then all of a sudden the whole thing collapses because somebody at the top was doing something wrong. You don't just automatically keep your job at the company once it's folded up, once everything's gone, busted and gone under. So to me, when everything you make is risk reward. And if Jim Harbaugh knew about this, those kids, when they entrusted their future with him at Michigan, they put at risk, whether knowingly or unknowingly, does not matter, that in a situation where Michigan is caught doing something nefarious, they have to also face the consequence. And it is what it is.